reviewing the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, the first one in 2020 where a Mercedes has not won. Max Verstappen starting in 4th place today, taking the victory for Red Bull. My name's Ben Hocking, joining me to review the race, as always, Harry Eade and Samuel Sage. Guys, what did you make of that one?
Spicy. Love the tyre wear. Bring on more tyre issues, please.
2 stops. Roll!
2 Stops is the name of the podcast now. We are no longer late breaking. We are called 2 Stops.
Correct.
Just going to check trademarks on that one before we confirm that decision. But yes, 2 stops rule. Can't disagree with that whatsoever. So Max Verstappen, like I say, taking the victory after starting on the hard tyres. He led home a Mercedes 2-3. Hamilton ahead of Bottas. We'll be debating that in a little bit. Of course, Bottas starting from pole position. Charles Leclerc for Ferrari finishing 4th, the only Ferrari in the points today. Alex Albon in 5th. Lance Stroll and Nico Hülkenberg 6th and 7th for Racing Point. Ocon in 8th after starting outside the top 10. And Norris and Danny Kvyat rounded out the point scorers. Sam, I'll start with you on this one, starting at the top. Max Verstappen managing to beat Mercedes. We did ask the question in our preview, would softer tyres give Verstappen the edge? Apparently the answer to that was yes. What did you make of his performance?
I mean, come on, Max Verstappen. That was one hell of a drive. Look at the entire grid struggling with that tyre. I think Charles Leclerc was the only other man that was realistically having an absolute breeze out there. What a drive from that Red Bull team. What a drive from Max Verstappen. He kept it calm, told his engineer that he doesn't want to act like a granny, so he's going to strike while the iron is hot. Mercedes absolutely struggling. As we've seen through hotter conditions, it really is their kryptonite. Max pulled out an absolute blinder. I am so impressed with Max Verstappen here today, and it shows why he really is going to be a World Drivers' Champion at some point in the future. It might even be this season. Who knows, depending on temperatures, if things carry on going this way and maybe we have some more tyre interventions that crop up. But that guy has got real talent. I mean, I saw a stat before we came on air. Max has won 8 Grand Prix since 2017. Bottas has won 8 Grand Prix since 2017. It's a little shocking, considering how good that Mercedes has been. Just hats off. Absolutely hats off. He's managed those tyres brilliantly. It's almost like Sergio Perez was behind the wheel of that car and they swapped over on the last lap or something. Brilliant drive from Max Verstappen. You love to see it. We want more of it.
Ironically, just on the point of Sergio Perez, how gutted would he be to miss out on these 2 races that have been dictated by tyre wear? Goodness. Max Verstappen. Harry, what did you make of that performance out there?
Yeah, it was kind of classic Max Verstappen, and I don't know, you got the sense early on from that radio message about grandmas and not driving like one that he was just kind of on one today. Like he had the sniff of victory early on when he was keeping up with the 2 Mercedes early on in the race, and yeah, he was just absolutely on one. It was great to see, and just great to see someone else challenge a Mercedes, and even with that dominant pace in qualifying, they're still beatable at some point. So that's great to see as well. But yeah, Max was mighty. I think that first stint in particular was just mega. Whilst seemingly everyone else on the grid was falling away, he was the only one who could manage his tyres properly.
Well, absolutely, and I think that first stint was the difference maker, really, because it seemed as if when Bottas and Hamilton came in for their first stops, immediately you think, okay, Verstappen's been on those tyres for quite a while now. These are completely fresh on the cards of Bottas and Hamilton, and suddenly Verstappen is not only matching the Mercedes, he's continuing to outpace them on tyres that are much, much older. And I think Bottas and Hamilton both struggling is an indication that it's perhaps more car-related than it is the 2 of those drivers being poor at managing them. We know Hamilton's been very good at that throughout his career. So I think it's more down to the Red Bull rather than the individual drivers themselves. But taking nothing away, that first stint opened up the strategy for him, which was the key. I know throughout the first few points of the race, it was a case of, okay, if Verstappen can one-stop this, he could be within a chance. That first stint enabled him to not only have that as a viable strategy, but it also then gave him a 2-stop as a viable strategy too. So, just opening the door for both, really. And even though Verstappen was essentially left to fight on his own against the 2 Mercedes with not having a rear gunner in that fight, that pace was so good that it didn't end up mattering. So really impressive from the Mercedes guys. Sam, were you disappointed that the Mercs couldn't keep up in terms of tyre wear?
Well, yeah, I am, but at the same time, I'm not. We see the Mercs keep up with everything, every other race of every other year, since I can remember almost watching Formula 1 at this point now. It's been that long. So, you know what? Have a race where you find it difficult, lads. And it was good to see Mercedes actually try and have to dig deep and do something a bit different and counteract and grow and come up with different strategy elements and try and pitch off the drivers against each other. It was really exciting to watch them have to go down that rabbit hole and come up with something new. So no, full props to Red Bull. You took advantage of a really difficult situation. Your car works better in that scenario. Well, Max's car works better in that scenario. And well done. Well done for taking advantage of it. And you know what, Mercedes? You've been brilliant at 99.9% of all Formula 1 related things for the last God knows how many years. I guess it's time to step up and try and do this one as well. And they probably will. If we get the same tyre compounds coming in for the rest of the season because Pirelli fancy it, then don't be shocked if within a race or so, Toto has turned the whole thing around and we've got a whole new look Mercedes that works perfectly with those tyres. Those engineers, they are fantastic and they will come back fighting. But no, full hats off to Red Bull. I'm more excited by Red Bull's ability to master that difficult strategy than I am about Mercedes' failure. They lost one place technically across the whole thing. Instead of finishing 1-2, they finished 2-3. So for me, it's still a good race, Mercedes. They still grow their Constructors' Championship points. They can still technically walk away happy. Bottas might not, but Mercedes will.
Yeah. Harry, do you think with Spain coming up next week, Spain in August, and then Italy and Belgium coming up as well, still in the summertime, do you think that Mercedes need to almost weather this storm and get back to a point where temperatures start to go down again and they're back in their comfort zone?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we might be due a couple of hot races still, with Spain particularly. They do have to watch out for Verstappen. You know, he's already jumped up to second place in the championship. Yeah, I mean, not to say they should be really worried. That car is still clearly the quickest car on the grid. But if they have a few more races like today, we know that Max is going to be there to pick up the spoils. So, yeah, they obviously will want to weather this storm and hope that cooler temperatures return pretty quickly, because they're not going to want too many repeats of today. One off or a couple is okay. But, yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Red Bull are going to be doing, what's the opposite to a rain dance? A hot dance, I don't know, but every race they want to be really, really hot temperatures so they can have a challenge to the Mercedes cars.
Yeah, I think these cars are so complex that even with the might of Mercedes, there's always going to be one weakness about a car, at least one weakness, that is. You can't build an indestructible car, and we've found really that it is the high temperatures that is this Mercedes flaw, and it's not completely out of character. It's something they've been poor at compared to their rivals in previous years, and it seems as if that has been exacerbated this year. And it's disappointing, really, because Mercedes are so good in every other area, but like I say, it's very difficult to cover off absolutely everything and ensure you are perfect in absolutely every aspect. So yeah, they'll be disappointed. I think what Mercedes do pretty well is when the situation isn't going their way, they still manage to limit the damage pretty well. Ultimately, they've taken 34 points out of the race today, which is only one fewer than Red Bull did. So it's far from a disaster from their perspective. Sam, do you think it was an oversight from the Mercedes guys to not try and qualify on the hard tyre?
100%. Why would you not try and split that strategy? You know that both your cars are going to be, I mean, even on a bad day, top 4. So what harm have you got by going, you know what, Lewis, you go on the hard tyre, Valtteri, you go on the medium. Why not give it a go? If you've seen that Verstappen managed to get through on that harder tyre, when you saw what happened to tyres in the race last time out, why not have a crack at it? I mean, it was fantastic that we saw such a changing tyre compound choice and not a single car starting on the softest compound. That's the first time ever since Pirelli took over from the league manufacturer of tyres for Formula 1. I mean, give it a go. You saw how, I mean, to be fair, would it have made much of a difference? Mercedes tore through those hard tyres so quickly. Something is clearly up with that car when it came to those tyre wear. It was not working for them. But I think it was definitely worth a split in that strategy, try and combat Red Bull. But once again, Mercedes have the upper hand because Alex Albon is just a little bit too far back, so maybe they thought they got away with it, but we'll get onto that a little later. Yeah, give it a go. Why not? What harm have you really got? You didn't win the race, so you may have done this time.
And I mean, this is something of a prelude to the discussion we'll get into in just a little bit, but splitting the strategy between mediums and hards and which driver goes on to which, Sam, how would you mitigate that? How would you decide who gets what call?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. This is why I'm not Toto. This is why I don't get paid lots and lots of money. And I live in a 2-bedroom flat in Croydon. It could be a lot better. But honestly, that's a tough choice to make. You have to realistically go with, I guess, put Lewis on the hard tyres. He's the championship leader, so maybe it's the first say. He's technically first driver. I know Mercedes don't really lean that way, but that is the case. And we know that Lewis is a little better at saving his tyres over Valtteri. So maybe you swap it then. Maybe you give Lewis the mediums because he's better on the longer runs on the tyre wear. So you give Valtteri the harder compound to manage for longer because it's easier to run on. There's a load of different differential reasons that you can pick up and put down as to why someone should do this and someone should do that. I don't know how they managed that one, but they managed to do it with Verstappen and Albon, and there was no real complaints there. So I'm sure they could do it at Mercedes.
Harry, were you surprised, not only in terms of Mercedes actually, but also of other cars, that there was no attempt to start on the hard tyre?
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit surprising. Maybe they just weren't confident enough to get it through Q2. I mean, I think that maybe flew under the radar slightly was how good Max's lap was in Q2 to get it through. Although, to be fair, I guess the hard this week was last week's medium, so they did that as well. So yeah, maybe it is slightly surprising, but I that's all I can put it down to, is that they were just concerned they wouldn't have made it through, and maybe it was just an oversight too, that they thought, well, the soft tyre, that we're definitely not going to start on that, so we'll go for the medium, when in fact the medium was just as susceptible to wear. So yeah, it's a strange one. It just shows that Red Bull have always, and I guess will always be, just on top of their strategy game. They're always the ones to do something different, and this week it's paid off.
And I think the weakness of the medium tyre was really evident in the race in Max Verstappen's strategy. I think if they had complete control over the strategy and there wasn't a mandatory tyre rule, I think Red Bull would have done 26 laps on the hard tyre, come in for some more hard tyres and done the other 26. I don't think they'd have bothered with the medium tyre, and I think on hindsight pretty much everyone would have agreed with that. Red Bull put those mediums on Verstappen's car for, I can't remember how many laps it was, but it felt like just a few. It was almost as if it was obligatory. They had to do it, but if they didn't have to do it, they wouldn't have done. And I am a bit surprised that Mercedes didn't at least try something. It's a point that Paul di Resta made at the end of commentary, that these guys all qualified on this tyre last week because it was last week's medium. So the Mercs qualified on it, and I'm surprised someone didn't. I'm surprised they didn't at least go out there and try it. They even went out on the soft tyre as a kind of dummy run at the end of Q2, which was never going to happen. They saw Verstappen do it. It was fairly evident from early on in the session, so it's not as if they had no time to react to it either. If it didn't work out, though, we would be saying Mercedes have the fastest car. Why did they feel the need to risk anything? So it is the benefit of hindsight here, but I think it speaks more to Red Bull's strategic strengths rather than Mercedes' strategic weaknesses, that they were able to see that this was a viable option. I was quite critical of Red Bull last time out in their decision to pit Verstappen late in the race, but I think 9 times out of 10, the Red Bull strategic team, I think Hannah Schmitz is the best in the game in that respect, and she and they proved it today. That was remarkable what they were able to achieve. Moving on to Bottas versus Hamilton. So, of course, Bottas got pole position away from Lewis Hamilton on Saturday, but it's Hamilton who ended up ahead. Hamilton remaining in his grid spot of second place, Bottas down 2 positions to third. Harry, what did you make of the strategic difference between the two drivers?
Yeah, it's a tricky one for Mercedes because, they don't want to be seen to be favouring anyone. And technically they had the same strategy, just that they pitted Hamilton and Bottas at different times. We saw Bottas after the race. He was pretty miffed about what had happened. I don't know what else they could have done. I don't know whether they could have brought Bottas in again to cover off Hamilton, but I don't think that would have worked. And they were obviously trying to get the win. And for Mercedes as a team, it doesn't matter which way they get the win, as long as they get the win. And they tried it both ways. They tried with Bottas, bringing him in at the relatively same time as Max, and they tried it with leaving Lewis out. So they threw, as Mercedes always do, they threw everything at it, and they tried alternate strategies, which they're able to do pretty often because normally both cars are in that fight. I just think it was luck of the draw, and it was just unlucky for Bottas on this one. He obviously didn't have the tyres left to fight Hamilton at the end, and it was pretty close in terms of time that between both those strategies. So, I feel bad for Bottas. He was pretty quicker than Hamilton for most of the race. Just his strategy didn't work out for him.
Yeah, Sam, what did you make of the strategic difference? Do you feel sorry for Bottas here?
Yeah, I'm very much in the same line of thinking what Harry's just said there, so I won't echo it too much. My only maybe difference in point would be that Mercedes, in terms of raw pace, and we've seen that strong pace with Bottas, he beat Hamilton to pole, is faster than Max Verstappen, especially on the same tyre. Bottas was stuck at around 2 seconds behind Max for the entire stint until maybe the last 10 laps. I would maybe have hoped that Bottas would have really gone for it. Even if it causes those tyres to shred, you're then going to push Max to defend, to fight, to have a go, and that could then cause the strategy to change again because you might tear up Verstappen's tyres along with it. For me, it's a case of Bottas not being aggressive enough. I know he's struggling around on those difficult tyres, but they came out the pit lane at the same time, and Bottas did not close up on Max at all. Max went straight past Bottas, and there was no fight at all there after that, after they were on the same tyres. They were on the same tyres for the same amount of laps. And we saw that when Hamilton came out that pit lane, he was 2 seconds a lap faster. That shows that the Mercedes always still had that pace. Yes, okay, they were tough on the tyres, but I just think that Bottas needs to do a little bit more again. Yeah, he was unlucky with the strategy call. Yes, it did benefit Lewis Hamilton more than it benefited Valtteri Bottas. I do think there was an extra 5 or 10% that Bottas could have given to really kind of mitigate the circumstance and stop maybe Hamilton coming past him, or even more so, cause a fight between himself and Verstappen up front. So for me, that's the difference maker there. Lewis did exactly what he needed to do and played it into the championship point system. He wasn't bothering about beating Verstappen. He only needed to beat Bottas to mitigate any issues. And Bottas now, because of the lack of aggressiveness and the strategy not going his way, falls into 3rd place in the championship, which is a little embarrassing with how incredibly good that car is.
I think with the first pit stop where Bottas came in first, obviously he had priority as he was the lead car. I've got no problem with that. Obviously, Hamilton came in straight afterwards. No problem with that at all. It's a real shame because I agree with what you said, Harry. I think Bottas was the quicker of the 2 drivers out there today. That first stint, I think Bottas had the edge. I think he was even slightly better in terms of tyre management early on in the Grand Prix. And I think it is just really bad luck that the strategy ended up not being the best one. And not to say that Hamilton didn't do a great job after he came out of the pits. He did have that tyre advantage, which he was able to take advantage of. But yeah, I think Bottas has just got really unlucky here, and I don't think it's Mercedes' fault for what they did. If it had worked the other way round and Hamilton had pit at the same time as Verstappen and it was Bottas that had gone about 8 or 9 laps longer and it hadn't worked out, Bottas would complain, rightfully so, saying that they'd left him out to dry, which was looking like what was going to happen. And I think in normal circumstances, the best strategy is to basically split it as Bottas did. His race was relatively well split between the stints. With Hamilton, he did a longer second stint and a much shorter last stint, only about 10 laps or so. So yeah, I think from Bottas's perspective, I can understand why he's gutted. Through strategy, he has ended up behind his teammate. But again, it's the power of hindsight. If you had to guess beforehand which one was going to be the better strategy, you don't know. Mercedes were absolutely in the right with the 2-on-1 advantage to split them. They had to do it. If they didn't do it, we'd be rightfully going after Mercedes right now, saying that they didn't do everything they could to win this Grand Prix. Bottas and Hamilton, one of them had to stay out longer and see if that was the right strategy, and one of them had to cover off Max and see if they could make an impression on him. As it happened, Hamilton was the one that was on the better strategy, and Bottas, unfortunately slips to third in the championship in a race where, after qualifying at least, he must have thought that he could eat into that lead somewhat, and as it happens, he's lost 3 points. So disappointing from Bottas' perspective, but I'm not going to go after Mercedes on this one.
Lovely.
Should we move on to driver of the day? Harry, who are you going to go for on this one?
Difficult to look past Max, isn't it, to be honest? He was pretty mighty. I'm going to give it to Max because I get to go first, which is nice. But other notable mention for me would be Charles Leclerc again. Like last week, he outdrove that Ferrari. Didn't deserve to be in fourth place. Shouldn't have beaten either Racing Point, in my view, to be honest. So, Max for me, Charles Leclerc, another strong weekend.
All right, and Sam, who are you going for?
Pretty much all the same names that were mentioned there. Max Verstappen, if Harry hadn't picked him, I definitely would have gone for him. I know it's not the rule that we have to have someone different, but it is always nice. Again, Charles Leclerc, fantastic drive from him. It's hard to look at the difference between Leclerc and Vettel and just be like, Leclerc is outdriving that car. He is dragging that car up. I think that car realistically should be finishing somewhere between 7th and 10th each race, and Leclerc multiple occasions now has put it in the top 4, and good on him for doing so. He's really proving his worth in that Ferrari. So I'm going to give it to Leclerc, but I would like to also give a notable mention to Danny Kvyat, who came from 16th on the grid, I think, finished in the points, beat his teammate who finished, I think, in P8. Quite a quiet Grand Prix, but it all worked out well for him, and he scores points. So also a really good drive, and the same from Ocon as well. Ocon a really good drive as well. So a lot of good drives from the midfield bunch.
Yeah, I would pick out those 3 drivers as well, to be honest with you. In that being Verstappen, Leclerc and Kvyat. Verstappen was sensational, and I am going to give my vote to him. But yeah, Charles Leclerc definitely deserves a mention, finishing 8 positions and about 40 seconds ahead of his teammates. And again, Danny Kvyat, after being knocked out in Q1 yesterday, he had work to do. And the most impressive thing from Kvyat's perspective is he did it on a 2-stop strategy. So, Kvyat was on a 2-stop. Behind him, Sainz was 2-stopping. Gasly, Vettel, they all 2-stopped as well. So it's not as if Kvyat was able to get there on the basis of a 1-stop like Ocon did. So, but yeah, fair play to Danny Kvyat, but my vote does go to Max Verstappen. And worst driver of the day, Harry, who's your pick on this one?
I sense a certain German driver in red is going to be mentioned a lot. He wasn't great on that first lap. Of course, I mean Sebastian Vettel. But for me, I'm going to go for Daniel Ricciardo. Just another rookie error, similar to Vettel. Just sort of dropped it on his own in a car that, Ocon, finished 8th, I think. And Ricciardo started 5th. And was having a good race until that mistake. So I'll go with Ricciardo because I think Vettel's probably going to be mentioned anyway.
And we will get onto the contrast between the Ferrari drivers in a later topic. Sam, what are you going for here?
Oh, this is really difficult. Vettel does deserve to be mentioned. You can tell that the car he's driving feels like an absolute pig, and he's tugging at each ear to go left and right at the moment. And you feel sorry for him. We saw, and we'll get onto it, but you saw for the first time ever that realistically Vettel told his team you just weren't good enough, and I'm fed up a bit. Daniel Ricciardo is another great shout. We love Danny Rick, and it's hard to see him drop it like that, but both Vettel and Ricciardo, 2 very experienced guys, dropping it on their own is just a little bit embarrassing. When you've got drivers like Latifi, Russell, guys at the back who are scrapping out so hard, who are putting in perfect races time after time after time. And Latifi beat Russell, didn't he? Or did he pit right at the end? He was leading Russell for a lot of the race. I know that anyway. So I think Latifi doing well. I'm going to have to just give it to Sebi Vet. But I think there's some mitigating factors in there, but it's still not good enough when your teammate's in 4th place.
I'm going to go with Sebastian Vettel, and I won't waste too much time on this one. 8 8 positions lower than your teammate isn't acceptable. Neither is being 30 seconds off the pace. Vettel started on that same strategy as Max Verstappen, so theoretically he had something to work with there, and it just didn't happen for him. That first corner spin is just, on the one hand, it's amateurish, and it's the worst thing is it's not a surprise. That's the worst thing for me, is that someone who has so many achievements in Formula One, so many accolades, has done so much for the sport, has such a rookie spin on the first corner of the first lap. And it's not surprising at all, because it's what we've become accustomed to see. So, yeah, Sebastian Vettel, he is the worst driver of the day for me.